Possession crucial from this. How much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar. Oh, holy Moses.
Hello, welcome to the RTÉ GAA podcast. I'm Mikey, Stafford, and we're here to review the first weekend of Allianz Football League action. Sodden Allianz Football League action. I think Mick Foley, who's joined me with Kevin McStay and Rory O'Neill, would say it's the way Allianz football should be. Mick, yeah, you like the wind, you like the rain. This is what it's all about.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because there's always a bit of hype before the start of a league, and it's exciting, and it's the games are back and everything else. But there's nothing tests your enthusiasm for a league match like a league match. Yesterday was a desperate. Yesterday was an appalling day, really. Weather-wise, at least in Croke Park on Saturday. Like Saturday was a lovely day, and Croke Park Saturday night was good conditions for a football game. But God help anybody who had to play yesterday.
Yeah. Yesterday was not a day to be standing on a gantry trying to man a TV camera. Anyway, I think we can all accept Trojan work done in Markovich Park by those camera people as they tried and failed, shall we say, to keep the rain, the wind driven rain off their cameras.
I tell you what Mayo Donegal watching it reminded me of the old music video for Come As You Are by Nirvana, where they basically just poured water on the camera lens and it was just like blurry figures behind it. I thought I was having some kind of psychotic episode watching it, to be honest, but Mayo will do that to you sometimes.
But Healy Park was actually worse, lads. I think the conditions in Healy Park were...
How did Conor McManus kick that point in those conditions? I know he wasn't long on the pitch, but how could he stand, never mind kick a 40-yard point?
They cut to the two cameramen on the top of the gantry at one stage. and then they showed the pictures that they were transmitting, and they were shaking. And
they were heading for Kansas.
I think they're brave men to be up on top of it.
Absolutely.
It was so look, it was the league football that we've come to know and love, and we'll probably get a few games of football will break out now in about 3 weeks' time when the worst of the Irish winter passes by. But look, as you mentioned, Nick, we got a game, and we got our first seismic shock of the year in Croke Park on Saturday night, and you were there, I know, and it was rub your eyes stuff at halftime for those of us who came in then. But the Dubs, now they're short a few, obviously some very significant few, like two of their full back line, you could say, their scorer in chief, but geez, there was enough of the spine of a team that collected 6 All-Irelands recently, enough, for that not to be like the first excuse to hand, I don't think.
Yeah. Seismic shock. I checked the Richter scale on it, to be honest. Like the thing, in fairness to Armagh coming down, because there'll be a lot, there has and will be a lot of talk about Dublin. Credit to Armagh, first of all, for the performance they put up. To me, some of the stuff that Armagh did wasn't that surprising. Like, we know that Rian O'Neill is top class. We know that Rory Grugan is a very good lieutenant to him. And wait until Oisin O'Neill comes back. We know that Charlie Oak Burns I think he's a special player. I think he looks like one of those sort of totemic footballers that Armagh produce once every couple of generations.
One of those lads who can take 8 steps while bouncing the ball. Always good to have one of them.
Was that a new position for him?
It was. But he was coming into, he was still, he played a hell of a lot of game right out tight to the sideline. So he'd take the ball on the sideline and then cut in, finding space with that angled run, it was an interesting, good way. They used the diagonal ball very, very well, and so on and so forth. But to the point about Dublin, I kind of feel like a little bit I'm behind the curve on this, because last season I ended up, for whatever, whether it was COVID related or whatever, I ended up seeing a lot of games down south rather than going to see Dublin in person until the latter stages of the championship. And so I dandered into Ireland semi-final last year. So obviously aware that the question marks over Dublin, but kind of thinking they've got to, this is their time now. And like, you know, and first 20 minutes they were superb against Mayo that day. But then after that, it was like, oh, good Lord. And, you know, meeting people in the press box before the game saying, geez, they can't be gone down that badly. And fellas going, oh, they are. the Leinster Championship was a real eye opener. I was very skeptical about it. And even going in last Saturday night, same as yourself or Mikey, I was kind of thinking, yeah, you know, there's enough there. Of course, the thing has to be said, you don't know the Dublin team now until you open the program, because they don't release it until just before the game. So opening the program going, yeah, there's enough there that they should be able at home. But yeah, I mean, the amount of things that were wrong, they were all, again, no more than what Armagh brought that was good was not surprising. What Dublin did poorly, they did poorly last year against Mayo as well. You know, shot selection, indiscipline, a lack of leadership outside of the obvious few that if you looked at the program, you went, yeah, him. There wasn't anything else coming in terms of leadership outside of the couple that you'd expect. The bench, again, when you looked at the program before the game, you went, okay, I thought there's not too many there. But then you're saying they're young, give them their dues. Let's see what they can do. But their bench proved, bar maybe one or two, to be quite light. They got unlucky with injuries as well. Like they missed, I think it was Kieran Kilkenny missed a free kick, and they brought Dean Rock straight in. And I was thinking to myself, okay, Dean Rock is going in. Cormac Costello is actually playing quite well so far. But it was actually Costello was coming out. So, you know, they were losing one marquee forward and putting on another. So it wasn't like they were ever they didn't get the two lads together, which may have made some difference. But overall, look, Armagh were just fitter. They looked fitter. They looked more hungry, to be honest, in terms of just work and what was required at that level. And they were coming down, as I said, they were coming down with a lot of talk, kind of just around them, that they might be able to do a job here. Whether they'd win or not was another day's work, but that they would deliver a performance. And they did, and it was good enough to win.
Yeah, I take Mick's point, Kev, that maybe it's not a seismic shock. I get that. And maybe Armagh winning wouldn't have been the biggest shock in the world, but I think a lot of people were very taken aback by the Dublin performance and the things that they did wrong in discipline for a start. Like, there was a ball going wide in the second half, and the Dublin defender shoved the Armagh forward in the back and gave away a free. It was a soft free. It was a silly, but like, you don't do that. You do that under Jim Gavin, you probably don't appear again till the next season's O'Byrne Cup. And then the shot selection, as Mick mentioned, which is just something that, like to the point where we'd be pulling our hair out saying, will one of you please shoot? No, not until, you know, Kieran Kilkenny gets the ball in the D unmarked, then he'll shoot. They were taking Hollywood pot shots from everywhere the other night, and with a caliber of player who maybe they could have done that 3 years ago with the forwards they had, but not with the ones that were on display on Saturday night.
Well, maybe to keep going on Mick's point about where Dublin, you know, he moseyed into the semi-final thing, and yeah, they'll have enough to do what they do and win the All-Ireland again. But like, when you look at not once offs or even two offs, but when you look at the trend, it's fairly obvious that Dublin have, I won't say stagnated, but they're, you know, there's 4 or 5 teams now getting quite close to them. I used this word a lot last year on this podcast, aura. The idea that they're going to win no matter what, you can come up and do whatever you want, but Dublin are going to be winning this in the end. That is gone now. There's no question about that. And even when they bring back James McCarthy, you know, Johnny Cooper, Keane O'Callaghan, that aura, that Jim Gavin aura is gone. Like, for instance, Sean McGoldrick had a very good line or a stat in his report on Sunday. It's only the second competitive back-to-back match that Dublin have lost in Croke Park in 12 years. So they lost the semi-final to Mayo, obviously, and now this league opener, the semi-final last year and the league opener, so back-to-back defeats. That's amazing. That's amazing consistency. But that whole, there's no consistency at the moment. There's no consistency in selection because they're looking for a few guys in the league. And with that then comes perhaps this indiscipline that some guys are freelancing a little bit. Like, there would be a real sense, lads, that under Jim Gavin, the pot shotters won't be down in Tralee next week taking pot shots, because they'll be sitting down warming themselves for a while, because there's a game plan that we get to, and you stay with it. So next Saturday, I'm actually down in Tralee next Saturday. Thank you, Rory. And that's, I mean, that just is a fabulous match now to be getting the second week of the league, because it's going to tell us an awful lot about the two teams. It's going to be for real. It's going to be real stuff next Saturday night for sure, 100%. But I'm going to finish on Armagh, because I think maybe to a certain, and maybe, of course, you asked me questions about Dublin. One of the big things with Armagh, if you look at who came on for them, now I played Armagh a lot when I was involved with Roscommon, and one of the kind of tests I have as the commentator is, do I recognize the subs who are coming on? You know, are they just McKenna Cup men, if we want to put it that way? Niall Grimley, Stephen Campbell, Ross McQuillan, Greg McCabe, Mark Shields. I know every one of them, and they have all been net contributors to Armagh over the last few years. And they're the five they brought on.
And they didn't use Conor Turbot, who's a nice player. Yeah.
So, like, you know, everybody's missing players, lads. You know, we're talking about what Dublin are down, and they are, of course, they're down. But every team, pretty much every team, not every team, pretty much every team are missing players at the beginning of the league. Lads coming back and rehabbing and so on. So it wasn't seismic. No sense of that, Mikey. I was discussing with Sean Moore on Thursday, and I said, they have a massive chance, because if you had a peep at them in the McKenna Cup, they were hungry, and they were digging into the tackle early on. They were crispy in the tackle. They were covering ground. They were well structured, and their conditioning was very, very good. So this was always going to be a major challenge for Dublin.
Yeah, final one on this one, match to you, Rory, and a question about Armagh as well, and more generally, kind of a trend perhaps we're seeing in football is the rise of the Rian O'Neill type forward. Now, Rian O'Neill is obviously superb. I think he could play in any line, but the fact that, as Mick mentioned, the diagonal ball is now a thing for Armagh. They're trusting their inside forwards to win ball and to do with it what needs to be done. This idea that, you know, you can now be a ball-winning full forward again, which is perhaps something that had gone out of the game for a while, or maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, but Rian O'Neill is the archetype, and we can see how effective it is when you have a big target man, play him the right ball, and trust him to do the right thing with it. Football can be a pretty simple game.
Yeah, but I mean, showing my age a wee bit here, but the diagonal ball, I mean, they were using that back in Joe Kernan's time. I mean, Stephen McDonnell and Ronan Clark.
John McEntee was the man with the diagonal ball.
Like Armagh always played a fairly expansive game. They were well able to kick it. I think what I would probably see with them, a lot of it is just reverting back to a kind of a traditional Armagh style. But I suppose it helps when you've got the personnel, you know, like ultimately it all comes down to, like, they've got it, like Kevin mentioned there, they have an extremely strong panel of players now. They've got really good subs to come on. I'd say their A's versus B's are quality training sessions. They have really good depth to their panel. And I think they'll establish themselves as a serious force in Division 1, and they're set for a good year. I think it's been a long time coming, though. It's not before time. I mean, Kerry McGeaney is in is this year 7 or year 8?
Yeah.
You know, this is not an overnight success, you know. Yeah. So
they have Tyrone next weekend, fellas.
And Tyrone next weekend at home, which will be a fabulous game, you know.
Yeah. Sorry, I wouldn't be like, I think they'll have a good season. I wouldn't be, you know, getting too overly excited about them just yet. The thing with Armagh, I feel down the years, has been when the game is played in their terms. You could say this for any team, I suppose. When the game is played in their terms, good stuff, you know. Yeah, it's all going nicely and well. The thing with Armagh is when someone sticks an old branch in the spokes, how they react in game, how do they react on the field to adversity has not always been to their benefit. So there's a job of work to do. Tyrone next week will be right crack. You know, they'll have Monaghan as well down the track. They have Kerry. There's a lot of and this is at its period as well when other teams, as we say, will be getting better. So there's a work. I mean, I'd say that they are in the top 4 in Ulster, but I wouldn't say any more than that at this point.
Yeah.
You know,
Kev, to move on then to the game that I'm jealous now that you're down Tralee for a couple of reasons. There are two teams now who would really appreciate a win over their biggest rivals, and secondly, there's just something about Dublin Kerry matches under the lights in Tralee. They're just any of them I can remember. They're always feisty as hell.
I did the last one. Was it a draw? The last one, the one where there was a row on the way out.
Yeah. You always get the impression the crowd have had about 5 pints coming in.
And Jim Gavin walked around.
What was that?
Well, as long as they have all the bulbs and the floodlights, we'll be fine. Sometimes the top right and top left hand corners from where you sit in the press box can get a bit murky, and unfortunately, even the new Kerry jersey design still hasn't resolved the very basic idea of being able to see the numbers on the back. But anyway, sorry,
that's an old journalistic whinge.
That's
that one
for another podcast.
Yeah, we won't bore our listeners with that one. So Kev, Kerry the other day, Kildare, some of our esteemed Kingdom pundits weren't overly impressed. But as we mentioned at the top of the show, it wasn't particularly a day for football, shall we say. Kildare showed some spine and some fight, which I think will absolutely delight Kildare fans. But no more than Dublin. Armagh fans should be getting too carried away. I don't think Kerry fans will be getting too worried either, will they?
No, I wouldn't think so. This one was opening day of the league. Not a lot to see. Move on to next weekend, I would think. Even though it was a very decent game of football. Kerry were missing a lot of players.
Were they though, Kev? Like who was missing for Kerry? I saw Jack O'Connor make reference that they were missing 7 or 8. I mean, it's scratching my head to ask myself.
It seemed like a lot. Well, the Gale lads wouldn't have been available anyway. Even though I see Stefan
Conbor,
he got badly hurt in that match.
He did.
So he could be long term. I wouldn't be to rhyme off the 8 that Jack.
I don't think they are missing that many, Kev. I would imagine when you see Kerry heading for championship, that team that took the field yesterday, you could be looking at 10 of them anyway.
Well, I tell you, if it is Rory, let me make this point. And I made it last year, and I think it's valid. Won't be interested to see what you say about it, but they're a little bit underpowered. Not a little bit. They're significantly underpowered at midfield. This is an issue, a massive issue for Kerry at the moment. And when Cork beat them a few years ago, do you remember that? Talking about rain in the middle of summer, the night we were down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the semi-final. Was it semi-final? It was, yeah. And the Australian lad got the goal the last second.
So he's gone playing hurling now.
Mark Keane, Kevin.
Yeah, Mark Keane. Thanks, lads. Yeah,
let's be his holy name.
The Cork or the Kerry midfield. For some time, like David Moore apart, obviously, who obviously is a very fun, but he's given massive service. He's at the tail end of his career. Sean O'Shea was thrown in yesterday with one of the Splans with Adrian Spillane, and like Sean O'Shea. Come on, fellas, the idea now that look, I might be eating my words before the season is out, but the idea that you have perhaps the best number 11 in the country. And you start to moving him out towards midfield. Maybe he is missing the 8. He's saying he is, but they were when Kerry are on the ball and running at you. They're fabulous team to look at. But they hung on in the end. They were 4 up, and Kildare got the last 4. And there was every sense that they were the team that were dominating, a bit like Mayo down in Sligo. There was only one team in it with 10 minutes to go. And I think that was a function of their conditioning and their energy. So I wouldn't be getting too worried about it. But look, I said it already. Next weekend will be for real. There'll be no shadow boxing next weekend. It'll be full on. And Kerry they've work to do this week. And I would say around the middle of the field is going to be the big issue.
Yeah. A word on Kildare then, Rory. They we mentioned them on the podcast last week that the team not going to be overhauled, and there was a lot of optimism around the backroom team and what impact they can have. They seem to have had an impact. Again, it's the first weekend of the league, but you could argue that even Jack O'Connor's Kildare the last 2 years, 4 points down going into the closing stages against All-Ireland contenders like Kerry, mightn't have fought back.
That's it. That's exactly the point that I was going to make on them. And that was the most impressive thing for me. was this just the kind of togetherness and the spirit and the fight they showed, which is not atypical of Kildare teams, you would say. I mean, they conceded a poxy goal. It was a dreadful goal.
The hand pass in that goal, by the way, Rory, just as a technical aside,
looked a little ropey, you know.
Ropey was way beyond ropey. He literally threw the ball to him.
Yeah, so that possibly should have been disallowed. But I would have said like that Kildare teams in the past may not have had the stomach to dig out something like that. Now, obviously, there was a lot of baggage around Jack O'Connor coming to town, Paul Galvin being in one camp, Jacko moving to the other camp. There was a massive crowd. The match was delayed by 15 minutes, a huge crowd in there. They're in front of their own. They're back in Division 1. That, to my mind, is an easy game for them to get up for. Can Kildare sustain that level of hunger, that level of desire, that level of fight, that level of character that they showed yesterday for a 7-game program and maintain their Division 1
the
status?
Next week, Rory, do you know?
They're heading for Donegal and Ballybuffet, which is a tough assignment now, you know. Look, every game in Division 1 is tough. Like, that's a cliche, I suppose. But I think, like, to my mind, what they did yesterday spoke volumes for the new management. The key thing from a Kildare perspective is, can they replicate that on a consistent basis in a league that they're going to be tested week in, week out? They might not necessarily have that same level of spite in them, given they mightn't have the same beef with, you know, whoever's coming down the tracks. And could they find themselves in a relegation battle after showing so much promise yesterday? And I think that would be a huge disappointment if that were the case.
I'd have thought, Rory, that Glenn Ryan in steering that ship, that effort would be non-negotiable.
Yeah.
With that group.
And it's great that they've gone back to one. I mean, I don't know when is the last time they had a Kildare man in charge of the team. Like Mick might know there. Like you're certainly going back a long way.
Pádraig Nolan was from Kildare, wasn't he? That's quite a while back.
Yeah.
But there may have been somebody in between.
So I think it was probably time. Like, people could argue that maybe Glenn should have gotten it before now. And I think they've incredible athleticism. They've got a couple of scoring forwards. They're very big around the middle of the field in the way that Kerry are not. And they've got a good goalkeeper. He's not bad. No, he's certainly not the sweeper keeper. He does stick. You won't see him kind of sallying down the field a la Rory begging. But I think there's like, he's married a under-20 victory. A couple of good players come in. Yeah, Kildare. I think we might have a Leinster Championship this year. Might.
Oh God.
I wouldn't get too carried away though.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
The Kerry thing is interesting. Like, Kevin makes the very, very correct point, like, about their centre field is the thing, and it has been
it's a huge issue.
I can't remember.
Is there 70 minutes in David Moore and Nick?
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether that's. I mean, there may have to be. Put it that way. Yeah. Like, I cannot remember. I mean, you're going back, I would say, to pre-Dara O'Shea, post-Jacko, for the last time that Kerry were this weak around midfield, and that's happened for 30 years now. Like, they're trying.
Connor is one of their hopes, isn't he? I just came into my mind there. And Jeremy O'Connor, isn't that?
I mean, the Gael. Funny enough, I mean, you have Jeremy O'Connor is the Gael. You had O'Cumbor and you have Jack Barry all in the Gael. All three big units who would be in and around there. But again, I mean, Adrian Spillane has like, all those four guys that I've just mentioned have all had their shot in there, and it's not really worked. Sean O'Shea played midfield last year. He played midfield during the McGrath Cup. He was at midfield for the McGrath Cup final as well. Not quite sure what's going on there. I'd say it's just filling gaps while
it might be sometimes, you know, if he's getting a lot of attention at 11.
Yeah, just get him out of there.
A coach can take you out of there. It happened to Gooch when he was in the corner getting welded into
Jack Barry's in the Gale as well, isn't he?
Yeah,
he is. But I mean,
and they'll have them back fairly shortly. They were beaten over the weekend, I think.
But like, you kind of say that, you know, Kerry fans won't be worried. They live in a perpetual state of anxiety. That's why they're successful, though. Yeah. That's why they're successful. So they will be. I mean, they walked through Cork in the McGrath Cup final, and I texted a couple of friends of mine below there, and it's kind of, you know, there was really nothing to see there really on the day, you know, and they were the giving out that came back, you know, kind of typical stuff, beating down on poor teams early in the year. Sick of it. Sick of it. Like, isn't it great to be sick of winning? But like, the point is that like what was more and more in Dublin. What the issue was last year remains the issue this year for the time being. Jack, the way Jack O'Connor was talking yesterday, look, there's obviously a process of work to be done there. They're trying to figure out a defensive system. I'd say they're trying to figure out the middle third most of all.
Yeah,
they really need to sort that out.
There was a lot. See, Mick, there was a lot of hoo-ha around them with all these minor victories, and I was talking to Eamon Fitzmaurice on Friday, and Eamon was making a really good point. He said, like, if you go back to the very first minor victory that they had, that's 2014. So the first batch of minors that they've gotten through, that's 8 years ago now. And he said, like, Sean O'Shea is
they were under 18s.
Yeah. Yes. Sean O'Shea is in his 5th year on the panel. Clifford is in his 4th. Like in Kerry, there would be a sense, it's about time, lads, like, you know, like, and we know that they don't have any patience down there. So I think the pressure on them is massive.
It must be immense. I mean, it's won All Ireland in 13 years. It's 8 years since their last one. We're heading up now. I did crunch the numbers last year. And I can't remember. Is it now the 3rd longest stint in their history without an All Ireland, or it's either the 2nd or 3rd anyway. So I mean, there's pressure anyway. I mean, default setting is pressure.
Yeah.
But now, and it's individual pressure on players now. Are you good enough?
Well, there's huge pressure on Jack as well, remember, as well as the team. So there's going to be a lot of boiling points.
But the flip side of that then is that Jack would look at it and go, well, look, Dublin are where Dublin are, as we've discussed. Who's coming next? Like, so Mayo, Tyrone, yes, obviously serious contenders. But if Kerry, it's the kind of year where Kerry, it's like a gap year, it's where Kerry would slip in and win All Ireland traditionally. So I'm sure Jack is looking at that and he'll back himself and he'll back the knowledge he has of them young fellas.
So,
but as Rory says, they're not young fellas anymore. That's
on Tyrone then, Kevin, and as we said, it was as far as the weather goes, it may have been the filthiest of them. Monaghan ground out a draw, which is probably the most used phrase of the Allianz Football League lexicon, perhaps. Monaghan ground out a draw. Some draw, amazing. But we wanted to talk to you about this, Kevin, particularly because Tyrone are All-Ireland champions, so the least to work on per se, allowing for notwithstanding the loss of some significant panel members over the winter. The last team to get back to training. Going into the Ulster Championship, which is not the same as going into the Munster Championship for Kerry or the Leinster Championship for Dublin, all credit to those esteemed competitions. It's a more compacted season now. So for all managers, there's a balance to be struck, isn't there, between, not making a hames of the league. Division 1, you've less jeopardy. Division 2, there's serious jeopardy. Division 3, there's serious enticement to go hard at the league. But for Division 1 teams, more so than ever, you could argue that the league is for surviving and for fine-tuning rather than for winning.
Yeah, that's a good summary. I think the big thing, Mikey, is every manager will have sat down and analysed the calendar and the provincial draw, obviously. The big thing is get out of the league with 2 matters resolved. Your selection, because you don't have any time after that to go fooling around with it. So your best formation, your best 20, who are your subs, who are your starters, who are your finishers. But critically, and this perhaps I think we've all mentioned it. Just about every team. Well, they're missing him, and him. You cannot rush back anybody in this league now. When they come back, they have to be ready to play. Because if they break down again, like say a dodgy hamstring, that sort of thing, they're going to miss the early part.
They missed the whole year.
Yeah. So that and it could be done. I've a nephew that got into the final numbers of the Mayo group, and he broke his ankle about 2 or 3 weeks ago in training down in the Centre of Excellence. And, when I was just doing the maths on how long he's going to be out for, sure, the season is over, essentially. But people coming back are going to have to be minded. The other thing then I mentioned is the draw. So I thought I had it in my notes, but I don't. Are Tyrone in the prelim in Ulster?
Yep.
Mana, yeah. For
Okay.
Mana. And
Well,
then they have Sorry.
Go on, Mike. Yeah. Go on,
No,
Mike.
I was just going to say they have Fermanagh first, and then they have Derry in the quarterfinal on the 1st of May.
Okay. Well, now, sure, there you have to hit the ground running because, okay, they'll take out Fermanagh, but Derry, ooh, wow, that would, and Derry and Tyrone, Jesus, they eat their young. So that would be sad. So they have to finish the league ready to play a championship, if you like, because what was the gap? It's only about 2 weeks, I think, to that prelim, perhaps. And remember, if they got caught up there is a league final. If they got caught up in that as well, this is, I was saying to you before we went recording the podcast, when we were involved in Roscommon previously, we went straight from a league semi-final into a championship game. I think it was 10 or 12 days later over in New York, and it's a very difficult thing to manage, Mikey, because traditionally, there was a gap of 5 or 6 weeks. You went on the challenge game circuit. Everybody was in fairly decent shape. You polished them all up a little bit and you got ready for the games you knew you had to be ready for. That luxury is not there now. And let me finish with this. It's new ground for everybody. Nobody's been through a season like this before. This is new ground now for us all. Because the league, I think we're all agreed, the league is going to be fairly savage, isn't it? I mean, the matches are hugely competitive in Division 1, 3 draws yesterday, and Division 2, because of the Tailteann blowback, is going to be equally competitive. So, like, you look at teams like me and Cork, etc., that got bad results yesterday, and there's no letting up there. They can hardly even think about the championship at this particular moment in time. They have to think of how to get the ship corrected.
Yeah, it does. It kind of accentuates kind of the gap that was there between the top 2 divisions in terms of what teams needed from it. Now there's obviously a real life, championship implication to not performing in Division 2. But it was ever thus that Division 1 teams, even Mayo, they went down to Division 2 last year. It didn't do them any harm in as much as they reached an All-Ireland final. The top teams they have the luxury of treating the league as that bit of a tune-up, whereas the contenders or the teams who are looking to get up there, the league is a far more serious business.
Yeah, it varies where you go on it. Like even within Division 1, there's probably the likes of Kildare now won't want to go down because they want to maintain the competition. But they would, like as you say, I mean, it probably helped Mayo to just take the foot off the gas a small little bit in that regard. The Tailteann Cup makes a huge difference to this now. But like,
Mick, can I ask you on that?
Yeah.
Is there a danger that we're starting to generate a bit of a stink off this Tailteann Cup in terms of how it's being referred to? Like that if the last thing you want to do is get relegated out to the Tailteann Cup. Is that the potential for that competition?
I think what people really mean is you're not in the qualifiers. That's what they really mean.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering, like, just in a more general sense, is this competition almost been set up for failure here now because everyone is going, there's a right whiff off that. Well, the last thing we want to do is end up there.
I appreciate, I take your point, but like
I'm only asking. No, I'm just wondering.
No, I think ultimately, like, teams don't want to get relegated, and we'll say, for example, from Division 2 and the teams in Division 3, it has been ever thus in Division 3 has always been a bear pit. That's that tipping point. Division 3 is so hard to get out of. Like, it's the tipping point to get up to Division 2, and then suddenly it's a whole new world, or can potentially be a whole new world for you. See Clare, so like. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, it's creating. I mean, the last time the GA did this, where they linked league to championship, was 2006, and they couldn't get the thing installed fast enough. That was when the Division 4 teams were automatically put into the Tommy Murphy Cup, and I remember that special congress, and they could not get that rule in. They actually the GA itself wanted to give it a year's grace and bring it in 2008, but the delegates on the day, including the GPA, mind you, said no, let's get this in for 2007. Went in. There was a link suddenly between. So if you went down from Division 3 into 4, you were out of the qualifiers. And if you were and if you got up, you were in. It was gone inside of 18 months because teams reared up. I mean, I made the point actually in the piece yesterday, like the
teams that voted for it reared up.
The teams that voted, but Kevin, they did. The 8 teams, it was incredible. And I can remember
they went home. They went home and realised that what they had just done.
And then come 2008, they all stood up, and it was a choreographed thing. And I remember shaking my head at it, going, "What's going on?" But like the
turkeys
this time,
actually voted for Christmas.
This time they can't afford this. The GA, I mean, cannot afford this to fail, because the league championship link is fundamental to every single conversation about champion structure. Not going there now, but in just just as an aside. So you're talking about creating a stink around it. I see what you're saying, but I think once it settles out and we know who's where, then we'll see we'll get a better sense of what the
competition
I think the bigger issue, Rory, and I even listened to the boys last night. There was a sense of, oh Jesus, if we get thrown into the Talchin, there was a little bit of a whiff of it. But they were fighting hard to stop that. But the bigger issue, of course, one we've mentioned in this podcast previously, is that they did not fix it for the All-Ireland final. And that I believe could well be the one that sinks it. If it does get a bad rap, that will be one of the key issues. I don't accept what Fergal McGill said about, they'd be lost in the hype and build up of an All-Ireland final week. The Talchin teams, don't accept that. And
played on Saturday night.
I agree. I think
on the All-Ireland weekend. Yeah,
played on the Saturday night the night before.
Rory, go further.
Weekend,
hang on. Go further. Play it on Sunday. Play it as the curtain raiser.
Tickets. The only thing I'd say, you know yourself. Let's say Dublin and Mayo are playing in an All-Ireland final, and you have to give 25,000 tickets to Antrim.
No, you don't have to give 25,000. You don't have to give 25,000. But I mean, come on, it's a GAA festival. It's not the prerogative of the two teams in the final. It's supposed to be for all the Gaels. And look, if you want something, you got to be bold.
Yeah.
If you want something to float, you have to be innovative, like relegating it to 3 weeks before the final.
Okay, I'm going to segue from this Charlton Cup final chat onto Meath. There, that's seamless. We were chatting about it beforehand. Rory, of all the sarcastic applauses I have heard in my time watching sport, I don't think I've heard one like that in the 45th minute in Pearse Stadium yesterday.
It was without a doubt the greatest ironic cheer I have ever heard, because there was probably very few Meath supporters down there, and that's what probably made it even more insulting. The ironic cheer was mostly Galway supporters. I kind of felt I felt a little bit sorry for him in the end. Nothing seemed to go right. It was just one of those days. They were appalling though. They were absolutely dreadful. And I know they were playing into a hurricane in the first half. Quite difficult maybe to work the ball into scoring positions. But even with the wind, I mean, it was the 46th minute. It was like 11 minutes into the second half before they registered their very first score. I don't know. I'd be worried about Meath. I think Meath could get dragged into a relegation dogfight in Division 2.
They were favourites last week, weren't they, for promotion? Or co-favourites?
Yeah. Poor Joyce was blaming the weather, Mick, shall we say, or thanking the weather and saying it was like an NFL overtime. He said winning the coin toss was like the most important thing that happened yesterday.
Well, it was a little bit, all right, whichever way the wind blew the coin was going to decide that. But look, I mean, you know what you're going to get when you go down to Salt Hill if the weather is anyway inclement. It doesn't even have to be that bad and the wind is kind of funny down there. So, look, it's about... look, it's tough. It's about application. It's about hard work, all that stuff, that you kind of have to limit the impact of the conditions. Like Meath, the goal, it was a high ball into the square and the lad dropped it and it went into the net and you kind of go, oh no, But I mean, on top of that, then obviously they have a poor performance. Meath have been prone to that a little bit. Kind of good, bottom falls out and then they come back again. I felt terrific sympathy for them. I'm not so sure that they will get dragged into a relegation dogfight. I mean, I'll put it this way. If last Sunday doesn't focus the mind, like there's one of two things going on. Either it's gone, or last Sunday will focus the mind and they'll kind of pull it around and they'll be fine. I mean, again, in Division 2, for a number of teams, consolidation is the thing. For me, that's really about getting up to Division 1. But now maybe it's about consolidation. Just for, but look, what does consolidation mean? Consolidation means winning next week. So,
Yeah.
Roscommon and
they're playing Roscommon, Kevin, and Roscommon did well to beat Cork. The two boys will shake their heads, but they were without a significant number of players. Both teams were. But so any kind of a win for either team would have been good, but it was a convincing Roscommon win, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a smashing win for Roscommon. And lads, two Corkonians here with me, red lights flashing because Cork were they were very average, and just underlines like every couple of weeks I get in my head, surely they're going to improve very soon now. And then they come and tog against Roscommon. I think they played for about 20 minutes, fellas, and then Roscommon just battered them away, really. And
still depending on Brian Hurley.
And Brian Hurley, from frees and play. No sense of urgency about their play. And yet, I think Meath will be thrilled that it's Roscommon that's coming to Navan, even with their 2 points next week, because Meath know that's a team that they can compete with. There were some good battles over the last few years. And if there's an ounce in Meath, if there's anything in Meath at all, there would have to be a reaction, because there's no reaction next weekend. Andy will have to have a big sit down and have a real think about it, because he's under, he had a lousy time with his board in recent months. Shocking, really, the board behaviour in truth. But having said that, just to see how it cranks it up, the pressure again. And now if he wasn't to get a decent performance and probably a result of some description next Sunday, then the pressure mounts again. So it's a good fixture for them. And if I was Roscommon this week, if I had them in training on Tuesday, I'd say, lads, we need to be afraid now, very afraid of what's we need to be ready for this, because they are, we know they're, I know it's a bit cliched, but they're a proud county and all that jazz. Yeah. But if there's anything in them, we'll see it next weekend.
I'm going to head these two boys off at Bale na Blah now and say there's no Cork chat this week. We'll save it a week or two. We're going to finish now in a minute, but I know Rory, you watched Derry and Down. One time Derry 6 points down on Saturday night. You were very impressed. I think we'd all kind of tipped Derry as promotion hopefuls, and they didn't do anything to dissuade you from that on Saturday.
No, absolutely nothing. If anything, only further underlined their promotion credentials. I think they will certainly be in the top two. They're in unbelievable shape, and to add a caveat there, and I know, look, I wouldn't necessarily, and we're not going back over the Cork goals, of course, but we do have to be mindful here. Derry were in Division 4 less than 18 months ago. Now they're being considered potential Ulster champions and somebody that could have a really big run at maybe last 8, last 4. So I think things can change quite quickly in Gaelic football, depending, and if you have the right management in place, I think he has them extremely well organised. They are, as I said, in top-class physical shape. They've got a really good depth to their panel. He's added a couple of really good strings to their bow up front. This guy, I know he hit and miss on Saturday night, but this guy, Lachlan Murray, I think is his name, played in the corner.
He's only a teenager, isn't he?
Teenager, 19, unbelievable potential. Obviously, you've got a really good midfield in Conor Glass and Kieran McFall. He's got Shane McGuigan there, who's you've got a 9 out of 10 free taker. Rory Gallagher team is going to be really well set up defensively, and they're not a very defensive team, mind you. Like, they will push right up on the kickouts. They'll retreat quite quickly. They've got a good shape about them. The one little fly in the ointment I would suggest is the Gareth McKinless injury looked a serious enough one. He stayed on for a couple of minutes afterwards, but he went off quite quickly. The way he landed just looked a little, I'd be worried. And to go back to Kevin's point earlier about injuries, like if you get a 2 to 3 month injury at this point now, that pretty much is your season gone, because by the time you get back and by the time you're in a shape to actually start doing some physical work, you could be midway through the championship. And so I think that would be a bit of a fly in the ointment. Similarly for Cormac Costello, we'll find out, I suppose, how serious his injury is, and Dublin can't afford to lose him. But Derry, I think, are in really, really good shape. And they're heading to O'Connor Park next weekend. They'll win that. They'll have 4 points on the board out of 4, and they will be set fair for, I would say, a strong push to potentially win this league and absolutely finish in the top 2.
the schedule really suits them actually, because as you say, they have Offaly away, then they have Cork at home.
Yeah.
So you'd be expecting they'll win their first 3 matches, and then I don't think they have Clare below Enniston. So they're basically, what I'm saying is they're leaving Roscommon, Meath, and Galway to the last 3 matches. Now they'll have a bank of stuff got by then. They'll obviously have to, and again though, as we keep saying, those teams will be better by then. Derry will be better. They'll be very interesting games, actually. The games involving Derry and those 3 teams at the end of the league will be interesting to see where everybody's at.
It's true. Look, I know none of us are gazing at the tea leaves and drawing too many conclusions from the first week, but there's a lot there to whet the appetite, and we'll play the rest of the games in the Dome, and we'll be laughing. Thank you very much to Kev. Thank you to Mick. Thank you to Rory. We'll be back on Thursday with a football/hurling show, preview the start of the Allianz Hurling League, and look ahead to week 2 of the Football League, as we have our first double league weekend /Six Nations /everything else you're having. Sleep now because you won't sleep at the weekend. Thank you, Kev. Thank you, Mick. Thank you, Rory, and we'll chat to you on Thursday.
Cheers, guys.
From this, how much longer will the referee allow? Dublin lead by a point, and there's the whistle. It's over. It's over.
We earned it by winning the last 2 matches on the road, and that's not going to be taken away from us.
But what I love in hurling, I love players that will never give in.
He hits it. It's over the bar.